Hi, this is Nicker from FaBs. Now you've started playing Flesh and Blood, which is great, and you've net decked, but now what? Just get your reps in, right? But wouldn't it be interesting if we actually had an understanding of what's in the deck and why it's in the deck? Now, I've stated it previously, I have the patented wheel technique. This was mostly for my videos to get a better grasp of what I wanted to convey. But actually, it's also interesting to actually learn what's the game plan of the deck, right? So I've net decked, now what type of deck is it? A classic example is Oldhim, which will block, 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 block until he grows old, and Briar, who just pukes out 4 cards each and every turn. Now, there is some sophistication to the Briar game plan because you have some deck building restraints and you want to play Electrify, Lightning Surge, you want to have these a great mix of non-attack and attack action cards. Actually, it is a deck building restraint because you need to play Rosetta because that pushes through a lot of damage. This works within your game plan, and this is how you execute that game plan. Now, furthering that, equipment also kind of has these deck building restraints with a Winter's Will. Why are there 25-30% ice cards in this deck? I will cut them because I have better cards. Well, maybe they're in there because of Winter's Will. So now you're getting a better understanding of why stuff is in the deck. But you also need to consider your local meta. Now, what's the core and what's the side? Even in a 40 card blitz deck, when you cannot sideboard, which is maybe not so obvious, but you can, of course, sideboard for your local army before you show up, right? So if you expect like 30-40% Olden players because John, Pete, and Klaasje will always show up with Olden, packing Sigil of Solace isn't so useful, but if you have these 3 or 4 Kano players in your local meta, you better be packing in Sigil of Solaces. So be considerate of what cards are flex spots, even for your Blitz deck. Now, for Classic Constructed, of course, you actually need to have a plan versus which and what deck you will play. But before we even go into matchups, you have to block. So how do 2-card hands play out? Even 1-card hands. And a great example of 1-card hands would be Rompet Club, a Snatch, because they have interesting breakpoint attacks, right? So this 4 and 7, Lightning Strike would be another great example. But how does this deck actually fare with 2 cards in hands? Kasai is a great example with Driving Blade and a blue card. It will attack for 5 and then for 2. So we have the Woo 2 patent pending. And now at one point you hear somebody say, yeah, we've pitch stacked and then I finished them off. And there was an interesting game, and that's why I'm making this video, where I was trying to figure out what my late game will be while I was playing the deck. And it was the first time playing the deck since a long time. That was really hard because I was trying to juggle too much things at once in my brain. So having a clear-cut plan for just pitch stacking and what matchup it's relevant in really helps you if you've, of course, if you're just playing it and you're trying to go along, experience helps, right? But if you've thought about it previously, so when will I even see the bottom of my deck versus Ultim, I need to consider what cards are for my second cycle. Versus Briar, I'm just trying to survive or push damage or out aggro them. That's not a game plan, right? But then it's not likely that it will hit my second cycle because turn 10 will never happen in a Brian match. It will be over in turn 3 or 4. So it matters when, right? Now, on what cards are useful in the second cycle? I think it's a great example of Riftbind and Chain, where you actually want to pitch that red Riftbind first round or first turn to your weapon attack, just because you want to have it somewhere in the bottom of your deck, because in the second cycle when people cannot block and you have a full stack of non-attacks with Blood Tap in your graveyard or in your banner zone, it actually helps push through damage. So what cards in my deck are better versus Ultim in the late cycle, in the second cycle of your deck versus the ones in your first cycle? So actually pitching a couple of red cards first turn is actually useful. Or how do I make a stack that will win the late game? How do I push through all that damage? Well, 3 Raging Beatdowns will get you a long way because you will intimidate all the cards in their hand. Block that, you SOB. So you have net deck, but do we understand the deck? That's the thing that I was trying to convey. So you have all these options that I stated here now, or all these steps that you can go through, or actually look at cards and say, okay, is this part of my game plan, or is this card in here because it's a deck building constraint to execute the game plan, or is it just really powerful combination with my equipment like Skeletor and Rosetta and Sonata. And what cards are core and side for a certain matchup. So if all the Olden players show up, I'm not bringing Sigil, and if all the Kano players, I'm bringing that. And next to that, you also need to be considerate of 2-card hands. So these 2-card hands that are powerful, once you see your opponent going all out and you have this 2-card combo and just some nice to have, blocking becomes easier. So you're just making the game easier for yourself, where you have more mental capacity to evaluate what your opponent is trying to attack you with in his game plan and how he's executing the game plan. And with regarding to pitch deck, just pitch deck, have a grasp of when, and have this grasp prior to you starting the game, and so you don't have to figure it out in the first couple of turns. But have a basic grasp of what cards are good in your late cycle, and this also goes in with the second of the 2-card hands, right? So you have 2-card hands and just pitch stack and bringing red cards to the bottom. So now you're re-evaluating the cards that you have in your hand. Maybe sometimes it's really good to just block 9 and arsenal a card, take that off turn, or even pitch it to the bottom of your deck. Just so you can attack with a weapon, or lightning strike, or sink. All these cards, they have a purpose if you know what your deck's plan is and how you execute it. So your game plan also goes into what matchup you are playing. It's different versus Olden, and it's one versus Briar. So be gracious in defeat. This is always important, and humble in victory. Nobody likes a dick opponent. And don't get discouraged by your local meta overlords. If that one guy is beating you each and every time with Brute, it's probably because his name is Baalhaus. But he probably did something which I stated without me stating it to him, but because he was having a grasp of the game and actually going into depth in it. And same with a buddy of mine who grinded Levia to dust. To blood. I don't know. He grinded Levia quite long, and now he finally got a deck list which he's really comfortable with, and he's also playing matchups perfectly to the matchups extent. So like versus Ultim, he's at the start of the game he already has an idea what's going to be at the bottom of my deck, and what's going to be for what's going to be in my first cycle and my second cycle cards. But play what you like and enjoy the game. That's all I have to say. Cheers, bye. Thanks for watching.